They say the devil don't knock, he waits at your dinner table, smiling like family. And maybe they're right. Name's Curtis. 68 years old. Retired auto engineer. I spent my life building things with my hands, engines, trust, a family. Sunday mornings used to smell like biscuits and gospel, not burnt silence and cold coffee. Back then, my porch stayed busy with the laughter of grandkids, my kids asking for advice, and neighbors who respected a man for staying true. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was mine. My wife, Lorraine, was quiet lately. Not the usual I'm tired kind of quiet, but the kind that watches you without really looking. My son, Calvin, glued to his phone. My daughter, Tasha, too busy for dinner. Something shifted. Like the house was holding its breath. Then the call came. Raymond Burke. My old boss. Man always wore suits too sharp for his soul. Said he wanted me at a corporate reunion dinner. We want to honor you, Curtis, he said. You are part of the family. Now, Raymond never did nothing without a reason. And when Lorraine lit up at the invite, I felt the chill. She laid out a dress she ain't worn since our 30th anniversary. She smiled at herself in the mirror longer than usual. That night, the hotel shimmered like it belonged in a movie. Downtown Atlanta, folks in tuxedos and high heels pretending they didn't know the grind that built this city. But me? I walked in with calloused hands and a polished pair of shoes. Proud. Till the hostess stopped me. Sir, deliveries go around back. Deliveries. I gave her my name. She scanned the list. You're not on here. I was about to walk away when the doors to the ballroom swung open. And I saw him, Raymond, grinning on stage, microphone in hand. Behind him, a screen lit up. Meet our new Vice President of Operations, Lorraine Carter. That was my wife's name. She walked out in that same dress, blinking under the lights, smiling like she just won the lottery. The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. I stood there frozen. My chest didn't ache, it burned. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was the applause. We drove home in silence. She didn't explain. Didn't say sorry. Just took off her heels, poured herself wine, and sat like she hadn't lit a match to 30 years. Later, I asked, how long? She didn't answer. Calvin muttered from the hallway, Mom just did what she had to do, Dad. That cut deeper than her silence. They all knew. My kids. My wife. All of them. They watched the ground beneath me crumble and said nothing. I went to bed that night without brushing my teeth. Just laid there, staring at the ceiling fan like it might tell me why. If the truth buried me tonight, I whispered, I'd dig myself out with my bare hands. Morning came slow. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, warm but unwelcome. I got dressed and stepped outside to clear my head. My driveway looked off, empty. My car. My 1972 Cutlass Supreme. The one I restored with my own hands over 20 years. Gone. Then I saw it, tow truck turning the corner. Mrs. Jenkins from next door watched from behind her curtains. Mr. Hardy pretended to water his plants. On the side of the tow truck, in black ink, signed transfer of ownership, Lorraine Carter. The radio from the porch next door played soft. I won't complain, the singer wailed. But that song hit different now. Mocked me. I didn't flinch. Didn't shout. Just stood there and remembered who I was. They thought they'd stripped me of everything, but they forgot who taught them how to fight. The morning air felt heavier than usual, like even the sky couldn't lift what had settled on my chest. I stepped outside and stared at the driveway. Empty. No Cutlass. Just two long cracks where the tires used to rest. That car wasn't just steel, it was sweat, memory, and pride. It was mine. Lorraine had left early. No footsteps, no kettle boiling. Just gone. Her jacket still hung on the coat rack, but even that didn't feel right. I leaned in, caught a whiff of cologne I didn't recognize, too sharp, too young. Wasn't mine. Never had been. I sat at the kitchen table, same one I built with my bare hands. My fingers ran along its edge, nicked, worn, sturdy. These hands built more than cars. They built a life. A family. A home. And now they trembled. But I didn't cry. A man weeps in movement, not in stillness. So I moved. The garage door creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years, though I'd walked through it just last week. Dust hung in the air like old grief. My workbench sat in the corner, untouched. Tools lined up in silence, calendar from '96 curling at the edges. A stack of jazz records still leaning where I left them. Coltrane on top. Funny how time stops in places we abandon. I didn't come in to fix anything. Just needed to breathe. That's when I saw it. The floorboard beneath my grandfather's workbench looked a little off, slightly raised at the corner. I stared at it for a beat. My grandfather used to say, fix the small parts before they blow the whole system. I knelt down, pried it loose with a flathead, and there it was. An envelope. Yellowed, sealed, marked in fading ink, for Jeremiah, only when you've lost everything. My chest tightened. I sat right there on the cold floor, legs crossed like a boy in trouble. Opened the letter. His handwriting hit me like a warm hand on the shoulder. Steady. Straight. If you're reading this, life's hit you hard. But don't you forget, you come from men who don't stay down. Each line sank deeper than the last. He spoke of betrayal. Of silence in family. Of men who smile at you while stealing what's yours. He said he'd kept something buried, not out of fear, but for timing. There's a deed, he wrote. Land. Yours. Hidden in plain sight. Where the world thought we had nothing. He ended with this, they might have taken what they can see, but what's yours is buried deeper. I stared at that letter long after I finished it. Then I stood. Made my way to the red toolbox. The one with the rusted hinges and stickers that peeled with time. It had been with me since before Lorraine. Before the kids. Before I knew how betrayal could wear the face of someone you kissed goodnight. I dug through the bottom tray, moved past old wrenches and oil-stained rags. Then I tapped the base. Hollow. There was a false bottom. Inside it, a plastic-wrapped envelope. A deed. Dated 1978. Property in Mississippi. 2 names on it. One was my grandfather's. The other, Raymond Burke. I stood there, staring at the paper, the room spinning slower than my thoughts. My former boss. The man who smiled while stealing. He had known about this. For years. It was never just about the job. Or Lorraine. Or the car. This went back further. This wasn't betrayal. This was a long game. And I'd just picked up my first piece on the board. I stood by the door, suitcase in hand. One of those old canvas ones with brass corners, frayed around the handle. I didn't pack like a man escaping. I packed like a man going to finish something. Slipped in my Bible, the letter tucked between Psalms and Proverbs. Slid in the suit I wore to my son's graduation. A clean white shirt. A pair of boots that had walked through both joy and mud. I've lost everything I built, maybe what's left to build was never in Atlanta. I didn't look back as I locked the door. The silence behind me already told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't leaving home. I was heading toward it. Ain't no storm that lasts forever, but you best walk before it spins back around, my Uncle Luther used to say, puffing on his pipe. The sky hung low as I pulled out the driveway, the air thick with memory. Highway 61 opened wide ahead, and I let the hum of the tires do most of the talking. The radio crackled between old blues stations, muddy waters bleeding through static, then fading into silence again. Past the sign for the Freedom Trail. Then another for Medgar Evers' home. Pieces of our history tucked in roadside grass like forgotten prayers. I imagined my grandfather driving this same road, eyes on the horizon, secrets weighing down his glove box. Somewhere around Yazoo, a black SUV merged behind me. Too clean. Too close. Kept pace for miles. I switched lanes. So did he. I took an exit to nowhere. He didn't. Still, it left a taste in my mouth I didn't like. Stopped at a gas station just before the town line. Two old men leaned on a Coke machine, talking slow and low. You hear someone sniffing round the old Burke land again? Them folks don't learn. That land got history, most of it don't like to be dug up. They didn't see me listening. But my blood did. By the time I rolled into the town, it felt like stepping through a wrinkle in time. One main road. Pecan trees shading a bench where three elders nodded at me like they knew my face from a picture frame. You kin to Jeremiah Burke? One of them asked, not moving his toothpick. I am Jeremiah Burke. That made them sit up straight. One spat tobacco in the dirt. At the county records office, a woman behind thick glasses peered at me like I was a puzzle she'd once known. You the grandson, she said. I nodded. She leaned in. That land don't stay quiet for long. She handed me a manila folder with a faded map inside. Lot 22. Burke Estate. That was all she said. That was all I needed. I didn't go to a hotel. I found a diner. Old booths, greasy air, sweet tea that tasted like memory. That's where Clarence found me. Mind if I sit? He asked, already lowering himself onto the bench across from me. Mid-50s, eyes like they'd seen things and never told a soul. I used to work for Raymond. Long time ago. I didn't say a word. Ain't it funny, he said, how fortunes always skip a generation. He smiled, left a napkin on the table with a number scribbled on it. And 4 words, don't trust your family. He stood. You're stirring ashes, son. Just make sure you're ready for what jumps out. Back at the motel, the neon sign outside blinked like a dying heartbeat. The air in the room was thick with mildew and questions. I spread out the map on the bed. Lot 22. Mississippi soil. Then a shadow passed the curtain. Knock. I froze. Who's there? No answer. Just slow, deliberate footsteps fading into gravel. I pressed my back to the door, heart thudding in my ears. I thought I'd come to find the past, but the past had already found me. I climbed the steps of the council building, winter light cutting shadows across the concrete. My heart didn't pound out of fear, it burned with cold focus. A man who spent his life building things with his hands now held a paper in his pocket heavier than any wrench he ever lifted. Inside that jacket was a deed, 2 names, 1 legacy. The room ahead was oak and velvet and polite smiles, everything I'd learned to command from my own shop. I didn't come here to ask. I came to answer. When they announced the meeting, the Burke Land Redevelopment Plan, I accepted because I needed answers. And I needed the truth. My invitation felt odd, a chance to speak, they said. I walked into a room filled with local officials, church deacons, community stakeholders. Velvet curtains hung behind the dais. A state flag sat in the corner, stiff as a promise. I walked past the long oak table, silent for decades, to my assigned seat. The deed rested against my chest. I felt it like a pulse. The chairman opened the floor with smooth words, welcoming everyone. I raised my hand, settled back. At the head sat Raymond Burke, hands folded, smile too bright. He said, "We thank Mr. Henderson for his years of service. Today's redevelopment is for the future, not the past." I watched that smile. Felt the words like tiny nails in my chest. He was speaking of me, my past, to justify my exclusion. I leaned forward. My voice calm. "Gentlemen, I've been told to welcome this plan, but I have a question. Why is my family's land being handed over without my knowledge?" The room shifted. Burke paused mid-smile. A ripple of surprise, then a ripple of laughter from younger men. But I held their gaze. I slid the deed onto the table, edges facing them. The ink and names glaring in the overhead light. My grandfather planted trees on that soil. My father died protecting our rights. And now we hear it's community redevelopment? My tone wasn't angry. It was assured. I'm not shouting, I'm stating facts. Burke chuckled. Funny how someone finds a document after 40 years. This is old paper, sir. I didn't flinch. Funny how someone buys silence, too. The ledger I have shows lease payments your company made to him. Eyes darted. The chairman's face drained. A local elder stood. He cleared his throat. Jeremiah Huey, he always paid his taxes. Never missed a year. Records here. The room fell into quiet. Knowledge spoke where my voice ended. Vindication settled in. Burke's grin wavered. Fear flickered in his eyes. It was my turn. I demanded the project stop until a full investigation. I handed copies of the ledger, the deed. I left them on the oak table, felt every eye track me leaving. Outside, the sun dipped behind the building, windows darkening like verdicts looming. An old security guard leaned by my truck. He folded his arms and nodded. They'll come after you now, Mr. Huey. You made the move they didn't expect. I gave him a nod. I looked back at the council building, steps I'd just walked. My breath evened. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Tonight, I traded fear for focus. The boardroom was only the beginning. The boardroom tried to bury the truth. Now I had to dig it up myself. Clarence's map was old, the corners curled and soft from years of hiding. I held it like a compass, something sacred, something dangerous. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet, and the road out to the country felt like driving straight through memory. Gravel crackled under the tires. Faded barns blinked past. Empty fields stretched like forgotten prayers. Every turn took me deeper, into land that remembered more than it ever said. I passed magnolia trees older than any man I knew. Their thick branches hung low, touching the ground like they were tired too. The air was wet with that thick southern heat, the kind that clings to your shirt and your bones. Cicadas screamed in the distance. I didn't rush. You don't rush when you're chasing the truth. You walk toward it like a man carrying a shovel, knowing you'll either find gold or a grave. The gate to the Burke family cemetery creaked when I pushed it. Rusted, bent, but still holding on like it refused to die quiet. Grass had swallowed half the headstones. Names faded, dates chipped off by weather and time. I walked slow, brushing aside weeds with the toe of my boot, heart pounding harder with every step. Clarence had circled something, right in the middle of the plot. Ellis J. Burke. May 1923 to January 1972. His name was everywhere in this town. On buildings, on plaques, in the mouths of folks who still clung to the illusion of progress. But next to him, half buried under weeds and a broken slab of granite, I found a headstone cracked clean down the middle. Jeremiah H. Burke. Loving father, betrayed son. My legs buckled. My knees hit dirt. I stared at that name, my name. No one ever told me there was another Jeremiah. Not my father. Not my mother. Not a soul. I touched the stone. Cold. Forgotten. Still here. They tried to bury your name, I said under my breath, but they didn't bury your blood. I sat there a while, the world silent but loud in my chest. Questions fired off in my mind, none of them landing with answers. How does a family forget its own son? How do you erase a name and expect the ground not to remember? When I stood, my body ached like I'd just been through war. And maybe I had. Through the trees, I saw the outline of a church, the one Clarence marked next. The roof sagged like an old man's shoulders. The paint peeled in long, tired strips. A plaque near the door read, Mount Olive Chapel, founded 1892. I stepped up and found a list of names carved into the foundation. My grandfather, Jeremiah H. Burke Sr., was there, plain as day. But Raymond Burke? Nowhere. Not even a mention. The door moaned when I pushed it open. Inside, dust ruled everything. Pews warped. A Bible lay split open on the pulpit like it had given up waiting. The stained glass above was broken, shards of saints scattered across the floor. I moved slow, careful. This place deserved respect. Behind the altar, I found the filing cabinet. Rusty, stubborn. It took everything I had to pry it open. Inside were papers yellowed with time, baptisms, marriages, land deeds. I dug through them, eyes scanning, breath caught. Then I found it. My father's baptism record. His name written in that delicate old script, Jeremiah H. Burke Jr. right below, one line that nearly knocked the wind out of me, sole heir to family estate. I kept reading. Buried deeper in the stack, a letter dated 1954. Community Trust Funds, Post-War Management by Raymond Burke. The ink faded, but the meaning burned clear. Funds missing. Misappropriation suspected. Investigations closed quietly. So this was it. The theft wasn't just of money, it was of history. Of legacy. Of names and truth. Raymond didn't build the Burke fortune. He hijacked it. My father's truth had been bulldozed by silence and Sunday suits. I sank into a pew, papers still in my hand. My father's voice echoed in my head, something he used to say when I got in trouble: don't ever let him rewrite who you are. I didn't understand it back then. But I do now. They stole my job. My family. My damn house. And they thought I'd stay quiet. They thought stripping me down would break me. But this ain't just about me anymore. I looked around at that crumbling church, at the dust dancing in the light. This was ours. They couldn't take that without fire. If they're gonna call me the problem, I said out loud, I'll make sure they remember my name when I leave the room. By the time I got back on the road, the sun had slipped behind the trees. I passed the chapel again on my way to the motel, just a glance over the shoulder. Something felt off. I slowed down. Rolled the window down. The sky wasn't just dark, it was glowing. Faint. Red. My heart kicked into gear. Smoke. I hit the brakes and turned around. Flames licked up the old wooden frame. Fire chewed through the roof, sparks popping like gunfire. I jumped out and ran. Fast. Too late. The church was already collapsing. And then I saw him. A man, tall, wide shoulders, standing at the edge of the trees. Still. Watching. Didn't move. Just stared. He knew I saw him. And then, just like that, he slipped into the woods without a word. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. The fire had taken over now. I stood there, fists clenched, lungs full of smoke and fury. They thought burning the truth would save them, I muttered, but I already memorized the gospel. I stood on the steps of the federal courthouse in Atlanta, feeling every concrete slab beneath my boots, knowing full well how many men like me had passed by these doors without ever being seen. They took my job, my wife, my car, now I was filing for truth. Crossing the threshold into that building, I felt the air change, security beep, polished floors, portraits of judges who had decided other men's fates but never ours. Miss Caldwell met me near the intake desk, her folder thick, spine worn. Mr. Huey, she said simply, here's the complaint. Jeremiah Huey versus Raymond Burke and Cross Lumber. The name felt solid in my throat. After decades of nodding, of staying quiet, I was bearing my name like a shield. In the waiting area, I overheard two men in suits, Burke's representatives, no doubt, sharing a low chuckle. That laugh hit harder than any blow I'd taken on the factory floor. I tapped my fingers on the wood bench, reminding myself, this time I wasn't invisible. Back at home, late that evening, I opened the file. Miss Caldwell had multiple scans, ledgers from 1978, typed entries showing land transfers from Burke's company into the McCall Trust. My grandfather's name scribbled in the margins, Raymond Burke's signature bold and clear. The numbers shook me, nearly 2 million acres listed, payments diverted, ownership quietly shifting. My heart pounded. I said aloud, they thought I forgot our history. I found the invoice. Empowerment rose in my chest, but anger followed fast. It was righteous. It was necessary. I sat in my desk lamp's pool of light, tracing each line, each date, each signature, knowing this was the moment where quiet stops and accountability begins. Then I found the note. A folder tucked behind the ledger said, Confidential, MB Files. Inside, yellowed and brittle, a handwritten memo, Ray, land cleared. Jeremiah out by 2023. Signed, Alice Burke. My blood ran cold. It was intentional, planned, decades in advance. Shock turned to sorrow, for my father, for my grandfather, and then shifted into something stronger, resolve. I photographed every page, backed up every document, and sent copies to Ms. Caldwell. The legal clock was ticking. Burke's team would move fast. I would have to move faster. Courtroom next day, Burke's lawyers motioned to dismiss. Mr. Huey, you retired. How do you assert harm now? The attorney asked, voice smooth. My gaze stayed steady. I didn't retire from my life. I retired from your factory. The harm is generational, I said. The judges exchanged glances. You could almost see their minds working. Outside the doors, cameras clicked. Headline in the making, Black retiree sues Megacorp for hidden legacy theft. I felt pride. I felt caution. This fight wasn't just mine. It was ours. Later that night, I sat in my home office, legal file spread across the desk, car title in hand. The title that Lorraine signed over listed Burke's company as lien holder. My phone rang. Block number. I answered. The voice said, you're messing with things you don't understand. Stop now or lose what you think you still have. I sat silent for a moment. Then I said, you already lost the only one of mine you couldn't buy, my silence. My jaw set. The boardroom was a rehearsal. The courtroom is the main act, and I just walked on stage. The elevator ride up glass and steel felt endless. Each floor passed like a memory I'd rather skip, the factory, the layoffs, the quiet dinners, the job they took, the name they erased. As the doors slid open on the executive suite of Clement Darnell Cross's company, I stepped into a world built for people who believed they owned everything, including other men's sweat. The downtown skyline stretched behind me, a reminder that this was their world. But I wasn't visiting. I was at war. I crossed the threshold into Clement's office. He sat behind a mahogany desk, degrees on the wall, a corporate insignia glinting under bright light. I leaned forward, my father's old tie still folded in my coat pocket, not for show but for truth. He greeted me with a polished smile. Jeremiah, I see you've taken quite an interest in old files. Calm voice. Old man hands. I replied quietly, I'm looking at what you hid behind them. The calmness I wore was thin. Under it, a storm gathered. We traded glances that carried sharpened edges instead of words. I felt the pace quicken. Time in this room acted like it always did in the factory. Second chances didn't exist. I slid the deed across the desk. Land details. Signatures. My grandfather's name. Clement's smile faltered. I said, this building, this city view, you're standing on the sweat of someone else. He leaned back. You retired. You left the game. I met his eyes. I left the factory. I never left the fight. The shift came when he realized I wasn't a former employee, I was a founding heir. Shareholders, developers, city leaders, they all watched unseen, smiles polite. I could almost hear their internal low hum, danger approaching. The moment someone called me former employee was the moment I reclaimed an identity they thought buried. Back in my home study late that night, the contrast couldn't be sharper. Glass towers replaced by engine blocks, family photos, and the old grandfather's watch still ticking on the shelf. I spoke aloud, louder than I thought I should. They expect me to fold. They don't know I built my strength in silence. I plotted next moves. Leak the ledger. Contact journalists. Wake the community. Move from courtroom tactics into public exposure. I recalled the words of a civil rights leader I admired: power concedes nothing without a demand. I felt the weight of them. This was beyond the legal fight. It was about truth meeting reckoning. I felt empowered, but caution lingered. No turning back now. The real payoff hit when I dug out blueprints and invoices for the old logistics building I helped renovate it for Cross Lumber years ago. The name on hero plaques, but the credits buried in small print. I showed the documents to Clement's team. That building lists my name, not yours. Suddenly his network scrambled, texts flying, whispered phone calls, panic coloring his face behind a corporate mask. The room crackled. Power was shifting. It wasn't victory yet, not clean. But inevitable. I felt vindicated. Yet fatigue tugged at me, age, years of being pushed aside, skepticism in my bones. I was tested, but so was the other side. Late night, city lights outside my window, I sat quiet. My phone buzzed. Anonymous number. I answered. You won't like what we do next. But you'll sure feel it. No name. Just a threat. I leaned back, scarred hands resting on the desk, hands that built engines, fixed mistakes, cleaned up messes others created. I whispered, bring it on. They had drawn the lines. Now I held the map. I drove into downtown Atlanta just after sunrise, the sky brightening and the city waking up around me. I reminded myself, they took our land, our names, now it's time we take the story back. I passed familiar church steeples and factories turned silent, signals of a community that built this place and got little in return. I met with local church leaders, old factory coworkers, and high school friends, people who knew sweat and silence, who knew what it felt like to be overlooked. Banners went up at the community center, hear the truth about the Burke legacy. A gospel choir warmed up in the back, deacons shook hands, kids handed out flyers with serious faces. My heart felt hopeful, tinged with that old memory of being ignored, but stronger. When I stepped up on the City Hall lawn stage and looked out at the crowd, faces of men and women who worked the land, raised the children, paid the taxes, I felt that moment when waiting ends and action begins. The hum of the crowd rose just before I cleared my throat. News crews arrived quicker than I expected. Cameras flashed. A national outlet was live streaming, the headline already reading Atlanta retiree takes on lumber giant. I held the ledger pages high for all to see and said, this is our story, not just mine. The deed, the documents, they were in my hands. Outside, Burke's lawyers fielded questions, then silence. No answer. Quiet becomes admission. The crowd gasped, shuffled, leaned in. Validation broke across their faces. I quoted my grandfather, you don't get respect, you earn it. I said, we earned our name back today. Cheers rose, shakes of heads, murmurs of disbelief. I felt the weight shift. What once was hidden was out. The pace surged, camera flashes, clapping, phones lifting, unity forming around a single truth. Later, after the rally, I walked alone to the boardwalk by the river behind the community center. Twilight slipped in, lights strung overhead, water reflecting the skyline. I thought of my father, always remember where you came from so you know where you're going. I pulled out my speech notes and rewrote the ending right there on the steps, listening to the river's slow flow. When I returned to the gathered group beneath the lights, I spoke, we are reclaiming legacy, justice, history. Tears mixed with pride in their eyes. The air held release and strength together. Then I said, we stand together or we fall divided. Silence fell, then applause that shook the boards beneath our feet. In that moment, hope transformed into a foundation we could build on. As the evening wound down, small clusters formed, lawyers, community organizers, church elders, all leaning in, planning strategy, public records release, class action filing, town hall meeting with developers. I sat in my car afterward, tired but alive, phone buzzing with old factory coworkers promising support. I thought, they took my job, my car, my name, today I took our stand. Satisfaction settled in, but vigilance stayed. This wasn't a celebration night, it was war in a new form. Then my inbox pinged. Anonymous file attached. I opened it. Scans of a letter from a federal housing agency tied to Burke's company. Something bigger than I thought. Systemic. Deep. I closed my eyes for a second and said, they didn't steal just my land. They stole half the story, and now I've got the proof. Dawn broke slowly over the front lawn of the community center in Atlanta. I arrived early, still carrying that tired ache of being unseen for too long, but hope seemed lighter in the air. Magnolias dropped petals softly around the sidewalk. Birds called from the trees. The skyline glowed behind the stage we set up. People from the rally returned, church elders in suits, former factory coworkers in boots, children with flyers in hand. The mayor stood tall, quiet until the right moment. When he stepped forward to unveil the plaque, Jeremiah McCall, champion of community legacy, 1947, I felt disbelief and pride mingle in my chest. Decades of being invisible folded into one moment of recognition. I cleared my throat and spoke of ancestors, thanked those who stood by me, and quoted Maya Angelou, I am a human being, nothing human is alien to me. The words hung in the morning air. For the first time I felt, not just allowed to be here, but acknowledged. The hurt of the past found a name. The future found a light. Later, I returned to my old workshop where the engines once rumbled and my hands were never idle. But today I wasn't shutting it down. I was transforming it. Tools laid neatly on the bench, the air smelled of oil and promise. I opened the old toolbox, the one with my grandfather's watch still ticking inside. That watch had ticked through layoffs, through being ignored, through every late night in the factory. Now it ticked toward something new. I signed papers establishing the McCall Legacy Trust, dedicated to young black mechanics and entrepreneurs who'd been told they didn't belong. I invited my daughter Lorenza to join me, along with local youth from the neighborhood. Standing there, I said, I'm not just reclaiming what was stolen, I'm building what can't be taken. Hope was alive in that room. Responsibility lay heavy, but I welcomed it. The legacy wasn't done, it was just beginning. Later that afternoon, I returned to the community center for the dedication ceremony. Drusilla, my wife, was waiting quietly. The kids sat in the front row. She walked over and offered a short apology, not full of weakness, but full of recognition. I lost sight of our roots, I'm sorry. I nodded, offered a handshake, then pulled her into a hug. Recognition is the first step, I said softly, but rebuilding comes next. Tears filled her eyes, and our daughter Lorenza watched with a knowing smile. It was healing. Not revenge, but renewal. For so long I had carried the hurt of being laid aside, ignored, unseen. This moment was different, it was us, together. New identity, old wounds acknowledged, becoming something stronger. Just as the ceremony wrapped up, I spotted a suited man near the edge of the crowd. He fumbled, knocked over a table of pamphlets, and a bundle of old memos spilled out, land sale records, listing names I recognized. My heartbeat surged. The exec from Cross Lumber, smug before, stood exposed. I stepped forward. Looks like the mistake you made, I told him, voice firm, was thinking I'd let you walk away unchallenged. The crowd gasped. Phones lifted. The power shifted in that second. This wasn't just applause, it was reckoning. I watched him scramble behind his facade. The satisfaction wasn't light, it was heavy, earned. And the community felt it too. As evening came, I walked home alone under streetlights. My phone buzzed. Message from a journalist in Washington, we're publishing Tuesday, your story will be front page. I stopped under a lamp, plaque reflection visible in my workshop window, grandfather's watch ticking in the toolbox. I whispered, they tried to steal my past. I claimed my present. Now I'm laying the path for our future, and nobody gets to walk that alone. The new legacy was rising. And this time I was standing in the center of it.